Welcome to a literary critical interpretation of the story of Adam and Eve found in chapters 2 and 3 in the biblical book of Genesis. I have entitled this study Eden as Allegorical Fable. Here I will present internal evidence from the Genesis story in conjunction with comparative evidence from the Gilgamesh Epic to support the following four conclusions. First, the literary genre of the piece is fable and is therefore entirely fictional. The dominant literary device is allegory, a sophisticated use of symbolic interaction. Third, the source is from the tablet 1 of the Gilgamesh Epic, an episode of 46 lines that I call The Taming of Enkidu. It was the basis for the allegorized Hebrew version of the same basic story. And fourth, the portrayal is modeled on a domestic situation in which young people receive parental instruction to refrain from sex. Now, there is, I think, evidence of redaction, by which I mean additions have been made to an earlier form of the story. The final form of the story is found in Genesis 2:4b to 3:24. Now here, without going into any detail, are the alleged additions I find. First, the four rivers of Eden in 2:10 through 14. Two, the tree of life motif introduced in 2:9 but described in 3:22 to 24. C, the statement about the dynamics of marriage. Therefore, a man leaves his father and mother in 2:24. Also, the motif of the perennial hostility of snakes and humans in 3:15, I think, is an embellishment. Also, but more questionable, possibly the naming of Eve may be a editorial comment. And finally, the unique form, not unique, but unique in being used with such consistency, Yahweh Elohim, translated Lord God. I think the explanation I favor is that Elohim has been added in an effort to relate the story to the creation story in Genesis 1. Now, I'm saying that the literary genre of the Eden narrative is an allegorical fable. How do you determine a genre? It's essential to a proper interpretation of a piece. You must know what kind of literature we're dealing with. That helps us adjust our expectations and to read the fable meaningfully. So what is a fable? Out of the dictionary I have this definition. A short tale to teach a moral lesson, often with animals or inanimate objects as characters. The Eden story contains all three of these traits. It's short, about 2 chapters. It has a moral lesson, warning against disobedience toward Yahweh, and it has the talking serpent, the hallmark of a fable. So, on the basis of those definitions, we're dealing with a fable. Allegory, let me define that. The dictionary says a representation of an abstract or spiritual meaning through concrete or material forms. Figurative treatment of one subject under the guise of another. Also, they note what they call a symbolical narrative. This is really an extended allegory like the Pilgrim's Progress. So it's essential that we approach this story as an allegorical fable. It makes best sense that way, I believe, as the intended meaning of the story. Now, we do have an example of an allegory also from the wisdom tradition in Ecclesiastes 12:1 and following, where also the major theme of the writing is human mortality. Now, let's look at the concept of symbolism in this allegory. Symbols are the building blocks of the allegory. Not only do characters represent something else, but events in the plot also. In our story, the eating of fruit is an event that has symbolic meaning. Now, here are the 6 symbols I find present in the story. Yahweh symbolizes the Father. Like a father, he provides for their needs, gives them chores to do, walks with them daily in the cool of the evening, makes clothes for them when in preparation for being banished. So you have Yahweh symbolizing father, or even fatherhood in a way. He's called the man. We call him Adam. He is, as the first man, he is every man. And the same with Eve. She is every woman. It is very much a sexual statement made about the difference in their sexuality and how to handle temptation. The serpent, bold as it may seem to us, it symbolizes an erection. The man is aroused, and this is what starts things going wrong. As I said, 5th, fruit eating symbolizes sexual intercourse. We think of the erotic images of fruit in the Song of Solomon. It's a very appropriate symbol. And the important motif or symbol of eyes closed versus eyes open. The difference in this is describing 2 types of awareness, is the best way to put it. One very limited, that is the eyes closed. Something is not functioning fully in the consciousness. And that something is really carnal knowledge, sexual knowledge, which according to the story, in the story, affected a profound shift in their consciousness that is described in many ways in the story, to be wise, to be like the gods, and so on. Now, the third point I wanted to make is that compared to this episode from the Gilgamesh Epic, compared with it, Genesis just looks like an allegorized version of the same thing, with expected variations and a different message, and a different literary context too. But still, there is enough correspondences to make it probable that the author of this story could read and knew and owned a copy of the Gilgamesh Epic and used it to quite deliberately to give his own version, a Hebrew version with Yahweh as the God. Now, I see 14 correspondences between the Genesis story and the Gilgamesh Epic in terms of setting, characterization, plot, and diction. all in the space of only 46 lines. Now, let me read the episode. The trapper went, bringing the harlot Shamhat with him. They set off on the journey, making direct way. On the third day they arrived at the appointed place, and the trapper and the harlot sat down at their posts. A first day and a second day they sat opposite the watering hole. The animals arrived and drank at the watering hole. The wild beasts arrived and slaked their thirst with water. Then he, Enkidu, offspring of the mountains, who eats grasses with the gazelles, came to drink at the watering hole with the animals. With the wild beasts he slaked his thirst with water. Then Shamhat saw him, a primitive, a savage fellow from the depths of the wilderness. The trapper said, "That is he, Shamhat. Release your clenched arms. Spread your legs so that he can take in your voluptuousness. Do not be restrained. Take his energy. When he sees you, he will draw near to you. Spread out your robes so he can lie upon you and perform for this primitive the task of womankind. His animals, who grew up in his wilderness, will become alien to him, and his lust will grow over you." Shamhat unclenched her bosom, exposed her sex, and he took in her voluptuousness. She was not restrained. She took his energy. She spread out her robe when he lay upon her. She performed for the primitive the task of womankind. His lust groaned over her for 6 days and 7 nights, and Enkidu stayed aroused and had intercourse with the harlot until he was sated with her charms. But when he turned his attention to his animals, the gazelle saw Enkidu and darted off. The wild animals distanced himself from his body. Enkidu, and then a break in the text, his utterly depleted body. His knees that wanted to go off with the animals went rigid. Enkidu was diminished. His running was not as before. But then he drew himself up, for his understanding had broadened. Turning around, he sat at the harlot's feet, gazing into her face, his ears attentive as the harlot spoke. The harlot said to Enkidu, "You are beautiful. Enkidu, you have become like a god. Why do you gallop around the wilderness with the wild beasts? Come, let me bring you into Uruk Haven, into the holy temple, the residence of Anu and Ishtar, the place of Gilgamesh, who is wise to perfection, but who struts his power over the people like a wild bull." This is the end of part 1. Part 2 you can find with a link posted here, and hopefully you'll visit that video as well. Thank you very much.